Pasta time. Hey, welcome back to At the Table. We've got a really tasty dish today. We have yet to make any pasta, which is crazy because I love pasta. It's one of my favorite things. So we are making a really healthy pasta from our Med Instead of Meds recipe. It is a whole wheat vegetable and basil pesto pasta. And we are gonna jump right in. We're using a lot of seasonal vegetables. We've got squash, zucchini. We do have broccoli, which is more of a winter vegetable, and we have a red bell pepper. So we're gonna get started with our pasta. So I've already got our water boiling. You wanna, of course, get it to a rolling boil and follow the directions on your box, whatever pasta you are using. So I'm just gonna throw that in here. And we are using, I'll show you the pasta in just 1 second. Give it a quick stir. We're using a whole wheat rotini pasta. So we will get that back to a boil and cook that. So this is the pasta that we're using. You want to make sure that it says whole grain. So if I go and look at the ingredients, the first ingredient should be whole wheat flour. Whole is the key word there. So you want to make sure that it says whole. I was looking at a few different pasta when I was picking this out. I was looking at some of the other pasta options, and there was one that it's in a yellow box. It says gluten-free, and it has like quinoa, maybe it's brown rice. There were 2 others, so it was 4 different types of grains that were in this pasta, and it was a gluten-free pasta, but it was not whole grain. And the way I knew it was not a whole grain pasta, because other than that, it sounded great. Quinoa is a really good grain for you. Brown rice is a really healthy grain for you. I think there was maybe legumes or something else in there. But when I looked at the first ingredient, it was white rice. So white rice is not a whole grain. It has had some of that grain removed, so it's no longer considered what we call whole. It's been altered. So that pasta was not a whole grain. So we want to just make sure that we're reading the ingredients list. First ingredient should be whole, whatever you're looking for. So whole wheat, brown rice, quinoa, those are all whole grains. So we are gonna cook this about 9 minutes, and we're gonna get it back to a boil, and we'll be good. So we'll let that start cooking. Meanwhile, I'm gonna go ahead and get our oil in our pan and start sauteing some of our vegetables. So we are gonna start with, y'all know I love my olive oil, just a little bit of olive oil, enough to kind of coat the bottom of the pan. And typically when we are doing vegetables, we want to start with those sturdy vegetables and work our way into our less sturdy vegetables. So the first thing I'm going to start with is going to be broccoli. Broccoli takes a little bit longer to cook, so I'm going to throw that in there first. The best way to maneuver your broccoli is just to start working around the outside. So nice firm grip on your knife, and you're just gonna work your way. And I did sharpen my knife, but it doesn't feel as sharp as I want it to be. And we're just gonna work our way around. Now you can save that stem for later and put it in a stew, whatever you might wanna do with that. Lots of uses with extra, with your leftover pieces of your broccoli stem. So I'm gonna cut that just a little bit further down. So if you see any pieces that maybe you want them to be broken up into smaller, you can just break them off manually or chop off some of that extra stem. This is all personal preference here. Depends on, you don't want really big chunks in your pan anyways, in your pasta dish, so go ahead and just make them a little bit smaller pieces. Now you can go ahead and buy that pre-chopped There are tons of options in the grocery store. So if you don't have the time to chop all of this, perfectly fine. You don't have to. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and finish our second one. And then I will join you guys back in just 1 minute and we will get our pan going.
Introducing the Star Communications app. All the tools you need in one convenient location. You can access Watch TV everywhere. Check local channel lineup. Check your Star email. View and pay your Star bill. Report troubles. Use your Star Security app. Check your home voicemail. Sign up for Crowd Fiber. Check your Wi-Fi speed. The list keeps going and going. Download for free from the App Store or Google Play.
All right, so we've got our broccoli chopped up. Our pasta is actually done. So we are just gonna throw it in the sink behind me. I've got a little strainer here and we'll let that strain while we finish up the rest of our chopping. So you wanna go ahead and add your garlic. I've got 2 to 3 cloves is what's recommended, and this is, we wanna use smaller ones. So since these are pretty small, we're just gonna go ahead and chop those on up. All right, and you could absolutely use a garlic press. You could use any other gadgets. There's a million out there, so you don't have to chop. But if you're not a gadget person, it's just as easy to just go ahead and chop that up. I've got a lot of vegetables I'm chopping here anyways, so since I've already got my knife and cutting board out, I'm just going to go ahead and chop up this garlic. But if you prefer, garlic can kind of leave a smell on your fingers. If you don't like that, if it bothers you, you can use a gadget. They also have the garlic that's minced already that you can buy in a little jar. I just don't like the minced as much as I like the fresh. It just has so much more flavor when it's fresh, and it's way cheaper. So I just tend to go for that fresh garlic instead. And it's already smelling so good. So we're just gonna let that cook for just a minute, and that way it'll start getting our oil fragrant and really get our pan nice and fragrant. So you can hear it sizzling a little bit. Get on our burner. All right, so now I'm gonna add our broccoli. Like I said, this is gonna take a little bit longer to cook. And I do have my pan on low, but this is a triple burner. So it does get really hot, and I turned it on before we started just so it would start warming up to get us going. So it is, typically you'd want your pan maybe on medium, medium high, but for the purposes of this today, we are gonna keep it on low. So we're gonna let that cook for just a minute, finish up the rest of our vegetables. So we've got a zucchini here. You can do just squash. If you're not a zucchini fan, you can use all zucchini. I usually cut off both ends, and then I'm gonna cut it down the middle. And then I like to just cut it in 3s or 4s. This one's a pretty large zucchini. So just gonna chop it up into smaller pieces. Now, if you want, you could make these bigger, you can make these smaller, totally up to you. And as we're working, I'm just gonna go ahead and throw this in. All right, let's do the other one. So this is definitely a recipe that has lots and lots of vegetables. If your family is not a big vegetable eater, you could modify this to pick the vegetables that your family does enjoy. So for me, I love onions and mushrooms are my go-tos. I pretty much eat onions and mushrooms every single week, and anything that I'm cooking, I just add those to it. So I think that would be really great in this dish. You could do a different pepper, you could do spinach. So whatever vegetables your family enjoys, you make it work for your family. So same thing goes with the squash versus zucchini. If your family does not like squash, but they like zucchini or vice versa, switch one out. Just make sure that you still have the same amount of vegetables because we want to make sure that we have lots and lots of vegetables in what we're eating anyways. And this is a great way to get those vegetables in. So the same way that I chopped up my zucchini, I'm doing my squash. So I cut both ends off, then I like to cut it down the middle, and then I just cut it into thirds or fourths, depending on how large your squash is, and add that in. You're gonna need a really big pan for this. As you can see, my pan is already starting to fill up. But we're just cooking it until tender, so we don't want to overcook those anyways. So this will be perfectly fine. All right, so we are going to finish up the rest of our squash, and then we will see you back in just 1 minute.
Sweetie, will you turn that down, please?
Keep life exciting, even when it's not. Watch TV everywhere from Star Communications.
All right, so we've got all of our squash added. We have our squash, zucchini, broccoli, all that's in here. We're gonna add some carrots next. Now, our recipe called for 5 to 6 carrots peeled and chopped. I'm just really lazy, so I decided to use the matchsticks that were already kind of grated finely. You could still buy the coins, the carrots that are in coins that are pre-chopped. So you have a couple options, or you can do it yourself if you're not lazy like me. But this is something I kind of keep in my pantry or my refrigerator anyways, because we like to add carrots to all kinds of things. You can add it to salads, you can add it to stir fries, this pasta. So this is something that's just a good buy at the grocery store to have on hand. And I'm just gauging it kind of what I think 5 to 6 carrots would amount to. Looks pretty good to me. I used half the bag. So if that gives you some context with how much. And I have cranked up my temp, so it is officially at medium. And we just want to cook these until tender. Now this is one of those things that is definitely preference. So if you like your vegetables really mushy, or mushy is not a good term, but more well done, then you could absolutely, cook them further. If you like them more crunchy, then make sure you pull them out earlier. So just keep that in mind based on what your preference is, what your family preference is, how long to cook this for. I like it to be somewhat crunchy, but I don't want it to be 100%, I guess raw would be the term. So we're gonna let that cook. I've got our last vegetable here. This is a red bell pepper. And trick for you, if it has 4 kind of nodules, I guess, at the bottom, that means it's a female pepper. It's sweeter, because girls are sweet, right? And then 3 would be the male pepper. So it's gonna be a little bit more of that savory flavor. So this completely just determines what you're putting it in and what you prefer. I like a little bit of sweetness to go along with this. The carrots are kind of sweet. This pepper would be a little sweet, and then we've got our savory with our broccoli and squash. So for this, you just top it and tail it. It's cutting off both ends. And then we are gonna pop out that middle piece. So you just use both fingers, pop it, and throw that away. And then now you can use your whole pepper, trying to eliminate some of that food waste that we happen to have so much. Think about when we're grocery shopping, when we're buying these things, if you're throwing half of it away when you're preparing it, you're wasting money, right? So we want to use as much of this pepper as we can to really get our money's worth, what we've put into it. And the colorful peppers tend to be a little bit more expensive than those green ones. You could absolutely use whatever color you prefer, whatever works better for your budget. I honestly like the colored ones better. I like the flavor better than I like the green. So you buy what fits with you. I thought this red would be really pretty in this because we've already got our green with our broccoli and zucchini, got some of that yellow, orange, and now we have red. So then we just make a little slit and then we slowly just cut out that membrane inside. And you are going to discard that unless you want to plant you a pepper for later. Then I cut it in half and then I just kind of cut it up into smaller pieces. We have tons of videos on knife skills, so if you have not seen all of our At the Table series, our Med Instead of Meds series that we did at the beginning of our At the Table show really highlighted a lot of those knife skills. So go back and watch those. They are on YouTube. I've also posted them on our Facebook page, Sampson County Extension page. So check us out in those places as well. We're gonna add all of that together, give it a good stir, and then we're gonna let it cook for just a few minutes, and then it will be good to go. So we will see you back in just a second when we have this all done.
After completing my contract, I still have to buy out of it? Come on. Here's your sign.
Switch to the sign that's keeping home secure and customers happy all over the area. Security from Star Communications. We pride ourselves on fair pricing and quick, friendly service every time.
Somebody trying to break into this place?
Security from Star Communications.
All right, our vegetables are done. They look nice and tender, just to how I like them. So we're gonna toss this in with our pasta here. Try to do it without making a mess, which is the struggle part. You can tell that we have so much more vegetables to pasta. And so this is typically what we want to start aiming for when we are eating pasta. 9 times out of 10, our pasta dishes are gonna be loaded with pasta, right? And then very little vegetables other than your maybe tomato sauce. So say you're making spaghetti, you might have a lot of noodles, a little bit of sauce, and maybe a lot of meat or moderate amount of meat. Here we have so many vegetables. So if you're thinking about our My Plate is typically gonna be a quarter grains, and then half fruits and vegetables, and then a quarter meat. So for this, we want to load up those vegetables and then kind of cut back on some of those grains, since that shouldn't encompass the majority of our plate, right? Majority of our plate should be made up of those fruits and vegetables. So that is kind of what we've already achieved here with this recipe. And you could add shrimp or chicken to this. You could, make this a full meal. If you're a vegetarian, you're already good to go. This does have cheese in it, so it's not full-on vegan, but you can adjust this to make it work for you and your diet. So we are gonna add our seasonings. Here we've got some black pepper, some salt, and then some crushed red peppers. Why does that sound weird? That's right, crushed red peppers. So we're just gonna sprinkle all that in. We have a teaspoon of red peppers. So if that's too much for you, scale back. That is also something you could completely omit and just leave this on the table. And then when it's time to serve it, you know, you have it on the table. If people like a little bit of spice, they can add the spice themselves. So next we're gonna add our basil pesto. Now I just bought some that's pre-made. If you want to, you could totally make your own, especially if you have a lot of basil in your house. Really, it's just basil, fresh basil, garlic, and olive oil. That's all that's in a basil pesto. It's not a ton of ingredients. We want to make sure that we're seeing something similar to that when we are reading our ingredients list. And cheese, I'm sorry. There's also Parmesan cheese when you're making basil pesto. So 4 ingredients total. So just make sure you're looking for that in your ingredients list for the jarred. So we are going to do, I believe it's 1/4 cup of basil pesto. Yep. So I'm gonna measure it out here and then pour it into, it's a little more, that's all right. There's a lot of oil at the top of that. We're just gonna dump that in. And I'm actually gonna spoon out some of the, had so much oil at the top, even though I shook it. That is one key if you are doing a jarred. The oil does tend to settle kind of at the top. So shake it really good and just kind of be aware of that when you are measuring it out. So then you're just gonna mix it all together. And then our last ingredient will be just to top it with some Parmesan cheese. So very, very simple here. This is definitely one of those recipes that you could eat it as a side dish, you could eat it as the main course. You could make, you know, the whole batch and then have it for different things for the week. So you could have it as a side for the week, or you could have it for a meal one night and eat the leftovers as a side dish. So definitely this is one of my favorites. I usually participate in Taste of Duplin that they have in Duplin County every year, and I set up as a vendor, and you guys can come taste some of the recipes that we make in our classes. I'm not sure what they're doing with Taste of Duplin for 2021, but this is one that I served and everybody loved it because it was so different than a lot of what the other vendors had. Most of the other vendors had some type of meat or maybe a dessert. So this was definitely a hit. We had tons of people come to Taste of Duplin and they all loved it. So I encourage you to give this a try, and you could, like I said, make this your own. Add your own vegetables, add your own flair to it. You could use a different pasta if you like. Just, we want to go for the whole grain. So even if it is not whole wheat, make sure it is a whole grain, whether it's a brown rice pasta or a quinoa pasta. They do have lentil pastas now, which are technically a legume, so a little different than a grain, but still would be a good option. So there's tons of different kinds of pastas out there now. So I hope that you try this and enjoy, and we will see you guys next time.